Welcome to the world's greatest minds, where the most successful, impactful, and creative game changers on the planet deliver their hardest-hitting advice in 30 minutes or less. Every guest is specifically handpicked, there's no paid placements allowed, and every conversation is completely authentic and entirely unscripted. Big ideas, raw conversations, and real impact. This is World's Greatest Minds, and the revolution of thought starts now. Today on World's Greatest Minds, we welcome a rare mind fluent in both numbers and narratives, the kind you can model your business and run your ads. Meet Abir Syed, CPA and FinTech innovator turned fractional CFO for high-growth e-commerce brands. Abir co-founded UpCounting, a finance firm tailored for DTC brands like Obvi and Bamboo Earth, helping them unlock smarter growth through integrated accounting and marketing strategies. He helped raise $50 million in funding, built finance systems from scratch, and even turned resilience into strategy. When he took over an acquired e-commerce brand solo, he's obsessed with preempting financial blind spots, not just tracking outcomes. Expect clarity, foresight, and a conversation that will redefine how you think about money, metrics, marketing. Please welcome Abir Syed. Dude, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So I'm so excited to interview you for a bunch of reasons, but I want to talk just briefly about the fact that you got 96th percentile in the MCATs and then did not pursue medicine. What the fuck were you thinking?
I mean, I wish I could say it was my choice, but yeah, I mean, I was pretty good at school back in the day, so I did really well in my science degree and did well on the MCAT. I just got waitlisted at the interviews. I guess I was kind of a little bit of a cocky bitch back then, so didn't do as well as I'd hoped on the interview. And because I was, again, maybe a little cocky, I didn't apply to a lot of med schools. I just applied to like the best one, the one that I wanted to go to. And then when I didn't get in, I was like, screw these people. They don't deserve me. I'm going to go become an accountant. Just again, childish, but that's kind of how that shook down.
No, it's interesting. Well, first of all, you don't meet many people that could be good at all of those things at the same time. Creative entrepreneurship, finance, medicine. Do you regret that? Do you wish you went into medicine, or are you happy the way that it ended up?
I'm generally not the type of person who ruminates on the past much, nor do I like think too much about the future. I'm very much kind of focused on the current and what I can actually control and focus or do. So to a certain extent, there's kind of like no purpose to regret for the most part. It was clearly a mistake that I made insofar as like what would have been the best decision at the time had I had the knowledge to act more appropriately. But it also kind of worked out better at the end of the day. Like I think I'm better off today having a pretty successful business, making pretty good money. Technically, I have the ability to not work and still cash in as opposed to working at a hospital. So I think it worked out better, but certainly it was a mistake, but there's no point in regretting it.
That's spoken like a true finance mind. It's like, man, it's just a red line on the balance sheet and we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Just curious, talk to me about, so here's the thing. Our listeners expect tactical. What I'd love to know, you raised $50 million. That is not a small raise. And for my listeners, we're sometimes spoiled with the idea, especially when you run around reading the Financial Times, you'll hear things like, oh, a 2 billion round, a 3 billion round. 50 million on an initial round is massive. Most initial rounds in my experience are things like the friends and family round or the angel round. That's a $500,000, 2 million, 3 million. You raised 50 million in one get. Talk to me about why you did that, what you did it for, and how you did it.
So at the time I was a VP finance at a startup, so I don't want to take all the credit because obviously there was a CEO who was a visionary, very charismatic guy. Actually, we were raising money for a very ambitious initiative, and so I was responsible for kind of handling the finance side of it, so all the financial models and whatnot. I think it maybe gives me a little bit more credit than I deserve because I think that, at least not for some people, but the dirty little secret is that in a lot of instances, especially for some very ambitious projects and at those stages, it is, maybe this is kind of obvious, but it's way more emotion than it is logic. So the models to a certain extent are, because a lot of the things are theoretical and things that you imagine that you can achieve, you're kind of just building out the models to fit the narrative that is more likely to close people. So candidly, there were instances where I built out my financial model based on my best estimates of how things would work out. But a lot of it is really guesses because the technology was so innovative. And so then I would just go to the CEO. I'm like, what valuation do you think you can sell? And be like this. I'm like, all right, I'll just change the assumptions so that the model fits it. And the truth is that like that I wouldn't, from my, at least the way I would explain to myself, like it's not really lying per se, because at the end of the day, it's just a range of what sort of outcomes are actually reasonable, because I could change 1% and all of a sudden the company's worth 800 million, or I could change it in a different direction and now it's worth 120 million, and that's maybe more sellable. So like it was very much having the logic fit the story, but that's the thing, like a lot of the decision makers at the time, they were just being essentially swayed by how well the narrative played out and how well kind of the dream was laid out for them by the CEO. And then I was just kind of making sure that there was enough, I guess, checkboxes from a financial side so they feel like they did their due diligence and, oh yeah, no, we base this on logic. But at the end of the day, it was like they were bought in emotionally before the fact.
There's so many value bombs in there. So from a couple of different levels. The first one is I love what you said. The writer downer is it's based way more on emotion than anything else. And
Mhm.
anybody else that's played the angel game or looked at PPMs or tried to make investments, you kind of start to get that sense when you get good. And I've made some horrible investments and I'm not good yet. But for our listener, I think that it's really that's a golden nugget from a professional who's done it. Finance is marketing in so many ways, especially on that level, right? It's like you're raising money. It's a pre-money valuation. All pre-money valuations are made up. They're all based off of random assumptions. And I
Mhm.
really like what you said about moving, this factor in this way and using this percentage can cascade across the entire ask. Just out of curiosity, let's say somebody was moving to raise funds and wanted to start having that discussion internally with themselves and their team. How do you start to think about a pre-money valuation? I like just to lead the witness a little bit. I like when you told the CEO, how much do you think you can raise? So
Yeah.
that feels like a really good start, but I'm curious, how did y'all start? And then if you were to coach our audience on doing that, what feels like the steps before you can actually put an offer in front of somebody with confidence?
It's a great question. I'd say you come at it from two angles. The first one is, I mean, in a sense, is kind of the way pricing is also often approached, but part of it is understanding the market and the appetite first and thinking of comparables and like what other people have raised, because inevitably there's going to be that anchor that exists. So if you, in our case, we were extremely innovative, so there wasn't really anything to compare to. But if you are in a realm that, I don't know, let's talk about AI, for example, you know that, okay, Anthropic is raising like this and OpenAI is raising like that. So that's kind of the anchor for an investor such that they have expectations around it. And it isn't necessarily something they can justify, but especially rich people, they tend to, I guess most people do this, but rich people in particular have a tendency to think that like their approach is extremely numerical and logical in terms of how they make their decisions. And so, but the truth is that they are still anchoring to those things. So if you're trying to raise money in a place where there have been historical transactions of like comparable companies or different sorts of circumstances, then you use that at the very least as a starting point, because in the same way that if you're pricing a product for DTC, it's like, well, how much do shoes sell for? Well, they can be as cheap
Mm.
as $50 or as high as $500, but I can't charge 84,000. So there is an element around there. And then the other part of it comes down to what do you actually need from a funding perspective. So it's what do you expect to do with the money? And that just comes down to a little bit of that strategy around the forecasting and the dilution aspect of it, because like you can take as much money as you can off the table. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that scene from Silicon Valley about like the guy who like raised way more than he needed, but then had a down round that basically killed his company. So you don't want to pump your valuation too much. You don't want to take too much money off the table and put yourself in a situation where you've now kind of doomed your future prospects because you're doing a down round. But then you want to also be thoughtful about like, what do I actually need this money for? What do I have to accomplish? And what goals do I need to be able to hit with this particular money that would then justify the next round? So I'm not just raising because, hey guys, I need more money. It's that I have achieved a particular milestone that merits the increase in valuation with reduced risk because certain risk was taken off the table by what I achieved in my previous round. So I think those two elements really need to be considered. And obviously there's a lot of work that goes into doing it well, but high level, those are the items.
So just the piggybacking on the last thing you said, there's a lot of hard work that goes into doing it well. Do people need an Abir? Like you, dude, it feels to me like, especially given that I know you're triple PhD smart. How accessible is this type of thing to two dudes or dudettes in a basement that have a really good idea? It's never, ever, ever, ever been a possibility for me in my mind. I'm like, there's no way I could ever do fundraisers because I don't know how to boat. I don't wear loafers without socks. I've never been to Brophy. You know what I mean? Like I didn't go
Yeah.
to a private school. And I just assume that it's this good old boys club where it's all who you know. Is that the case? Or is there a system or a model where it's so much more accessible than people realize?
It is a little bit of both. I'd say that there are groups of people with money. So you have the people who are a little bit more institutional, who are a little bit more of a club, and you have to go golfing and stuff to be able to get in with them. So there's obviously the network element to it, but then there's also other people that you can just raise money from because of the fact that you happen to know them and they just like you. In our case, we did get a lot of money from people like that. There were a lot of family offices that invested in what we were doing. We also had institutional investors, but the thing is, the family offices invested because they met the CEO and they're like, wow, this is the most impressive person I've ever met. And that was enough. And like one of our investors was like the former CEO of Cisco. So he'd
Mm.
already like retired from Cisco. He was filthy rich. But for him, it was like, I just like this guy. And I'm just going to invest in him. So it didn't really matter. Not that he didn't have at least somewhat impressive background, but he didn't have that massive network that came from, having parents that went to Ivy League schools or anything like that. Like he really built it himself and he
So you can just
deservedly
knock on
so.
doors and kind of I mean, are there are mechanisms in place that allow for that conversation to start?
I would say that a lot of it was built through his personal branding and charisma. So he would just go and speak at places. He would build up that. He would meet people. He would just kind of keep building out the network. But where he started from was nothing. Like, it's not like his parents hooked him up. It's not like he, went to Harvard or something. So it was very much something he built from scratch. And so it is accessible. And to answer the other part of the question, insofar as like, do they need someone like me? I think that the range of outcomes are broad enough that honestly, if you were to just guess, you'd probably still be able to function. Now, obviously, it's kind of like diminishing returns. At a certain point, like, you don't need to calculate things down to the day and to the dollar. Like, I'm going to run out of cash on June 7th in 2032. Like, there's diminishing returns to that. But I think insofar as like the very, very broad strokes, especially early on, whether you're able to raise 1 million or 1.5 million, and whether that runs you 18 months or 22 months, it's not really the thing that's needle moving. I mean, at the end of the day, it would have been very difficult for you to predict it any better. So just take your best guess and go. Yes, when you get to a point where you have a team of people that have payroll expectations, like you need to take care of people, you have much bigger investors, then at that point, yes, you do want someone like me, in part to build out the model to help you set your targets correctly. But more importantly, it's not about the model as much as it is holding you on course after the fact. So you raise whatever you raise. You can raise 10 million or 15 million, but after that, let's manage our burn. Let's maintain our expenses where they need to be and have the discipline financially to spend effectively. That's the more important part, rather than just, you can guess a number and just get away with whatever you can get away with, and who cares?
Yeah, well, and there's an insurance policy too to be able to point and say, "Look, we've got a smart guy that put this together."
True.
If you don't mind, segue, talk to me about your greatest successes. What are the things you're most proud of?
It's tricky. That's a little bit difficult for me to answer because I'm not the type of person who feels proud about anything I've done. So like, maybe on paper, other people look at some of the things I've done, like, oh wow, that's impressive. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It was all right, I guess.
Dude,
So
that's so
I think
funny
it's
to hear you
hard.
say, because I'm looking at your resume right now and I'm like, dude, this guy has just knocked it out of the park. I feel like you can't miss.
I mean, I
Multiple
appreciate
industries,
it.
multiple business classes. What on earth is fintech? I realize financial technology is like a category unto itself, but when we say Abir is a fintech innovator, like tell me what you did that, because it's all feels so inaccessible to me.
No, fair enough. It's probably stated a little bit more elaborately than it really is, because at the core, we're a service business, and what we do is we provide DTC brands with the resources necessary. The way I put it is just to make better decisions. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So like, we don't, like, yes, a lot of the work that we do is accounting. A lot of it is data and financial presentation and then forecasting and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, as long as I can make better decisions, I don't really care how I do it. I'm just going to use the tools at my disposal to help them. And the tool that is the most at my disposal, at least for myself and my team, is the accounting and finance expertise. So in my case in particular, like when I work with a brand, I also can layer on the expertise around e-commerce specifically, and marketing, and the network that I have in terms of being able to connect them with people who can solve for their constraints and drive the results in the places where they need the help the most. But at the end of the day, it's just, I want the brands to succeed and make better decisions, so we help them as best we can. There's technology that goes into it, but I wouldn't necessarily put us into the class of fintech companies that are based on, like, I guess to answer the question about what those people are, it's typically just non-traditional ways of making finance accessible. So you've got the bank, which is traditional, and then there's like every other thing that makes it easier. Like, I can just go open a bank account online or get a loan through some sort of calculator that plugs into my Shopify. That's all fintech.
So to me, it's always just been better graphs. It's like it's trying to visualizes this better. Out of curiosity, what do you think AI does to your industry?
Enough that in the short term, it should make our lives a lot easier. And I think at the point where it makes us obsolete, if you will, I think that is probably a stage that the world has changed so much that, like, I'm not really in a position to care about what we're gonna do. I think at that point we'll probably need like UBI, because nobody's gonna have any job to do anything, because everything's gonna be robots. So
Mhm.
I think that stage is the one, like, I don't spend too much time thinking about, because it doesn't really serve me in the short term. But insofar as at the very least being able to handle a lot of the work that is a little bit more, let's call it, less open to judgment, and also methodical enough that it is repetitive and can be reinforced to be more effective with previous executions and more data. Those are the things that are just going to, at the very least, improve our margins, and or just make it easier for us to deliver a higher quality product more quickly, because you don't have humans doing things. It's just AI doing stuff instantly. It just improves the quality of what we can give to our clients. So to me, I embrace it as much as I can, because it just makes things better for people. I'm not as concerned either about like what it does to the team. Like, yeah, we might hire fewer people going forward, but for the team we have, they're fantastic. So it just gives me an opportunity to give them more complex things to work on and to grow.
Which of all the AI products, which one do you think is most adept at financial modeling, asking the questions, not hallucinating? Which one do you like the best?
Right now, I wouldn't say it's any of like the open models per se. It's more tools that have integrated some of those models into what they're doing, but they have like very robust data sets. Iris is one that I very much like. In full disclosure, I've also invested in them, but
What did you call it?
Iris
Iris?
Financial.
Iris Financial. Okay.
Yeah, so but it's not like a full AI tool per se. It's just a very robust financial planning tool that incorporates AI, and that's why I invested it because I believe in like what they're doing, what they're capable of. But there's still a lot of room or ground to be covered by any of the tools in that space, and it's something that at one point I'd like to do a little bit more of our own developing around. But ultimately, it's a question of our industry is generally so far behind in this realm that any sort of like proactivity here is just going to set us on a path that will be quite ahead of everyone else, I'd hope.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that strikes me as dangerous, and I'm seeing this in every industry that I have, what would you say, that I have access to the nuts and bolts of, the over reliance on AI. It's crazy and hubristic. Like I'm actually watching. I've got a really good friend who has a business that the entirety of the front end is all based on the phones. And dude
Mhm.
went and just got sold and fell in love with this AI system and swapped out his entire call team. And what's sad is it worked better in the beginning, but he didn't realize it's because he was dealing with it was a confirmation bias data set. He
Mhm.
had 90 days worth of pipe of customers that had already been warmed up. And so when you switched them over to an AI center, they're like, all right, I'm already here. I've already done it. I've already agreed. Psychologically, I'm committed. And so he makes the switch, thinks he's a genius, X's his profitability because it's a very labor intensive infrastructure. And then all of a sudden it collapses. And now when he tries to switch back, going back to those vendors, those employees who have all kind of dispersed, it's difficult. And I'm seeing people do that over and over and over again. Curious
Yeah.
on your end, like what's the right way to deploy those types of tools so you don't rip the rug out from under yourself?
So I love the fact that you specifically tied it into hubris right at the beginning because I think that it does very much tie into that because the entrepreneurs, if you will, who see themselves as like being cutting edge, they're the people who jump on it with a limited understanding because they feel like it's the smart and edgy thing to do so that they're the ones who are going to like win the market and stuff like that. And they don't necessarily think through the implications of it. And so to a certain extent, I think in the market, there is that kind of like hype cycle that has been transpiring where like the beginning there would be very few adoption. Then everybody jumped on board, especially when like Shopify's CEO was like, everybody needs to use AI. And then like everybody's like, oh shoot, we also need to make everybody use AI. And so
Yeah.
they roll it across the company. So I've seen like a lot of people kind of go through that process, but then also pulling back after the fact when they realize like maybe it's not as easy. Like candidly, even my co-founders at one point, they sent a message in Slack, like everybody should be using AI. I'm like, you gotta be more, you gotta explain, like, what does that mean?
What does that
You
mean?
think that that's leadership of some sort, but it's
Yeah.
not. And I find like that the way that it has probably been riding that wave in the market is a little bit similar to how I've been kind of personally experiencing it. Because same thing at the beginning, I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. And I tried to use it as much as possible. And then at a certain point, I realized I'm like, am I dulling my own ability to think clearly through things by just like over relying on it? And so like to a certain extent I've also had this relationship with it where I use it very excessively and then I kind of start pulling back like maybe I don't want to be doing those things. Like I know it's slower, I know it's harder, but I want to be able to think better, and so I don't want to rely on it too much for that fact. So I think in on a personal level, like it's easy for me to kind of notice that might be happening, but I think that for like you alluded to, some of these companies have that issue where like they just, especially if they're a little bit more fast and loose with just kind of like jumping at ideas, they probably jump on it, they get excited about it, and then when it fails, they're like, oh shit, why did this fail? And then they're not really sure how to kind of dig themselves out of that hole. I think with respect to the adoption element of it, it's probably maybe a little bit of an oversimplification as to an answer, but I think it comes down to thinking a lot more about enablement rather than replacement. And so I
Mm.
think that when you think about, okay, this is the core team that I have, these are the core responsibilities, and let me allow them or help them use AI to execute on those responsibilities more effectively, that's a case where you have a lot more room for error because if things work well, great. If they don't, the humans are still there. And they can slowly roll it out in a much more tangible and thoughtful way. At the same time, not necessarily having that element of feeling like a Luddite come in. We're like, well, I don't want to give that up, but what am I going to do with my job? It's like they see it happening very gradually. So they also see, I dropped 10%. I don't have to do this anymore. I hated doing that, but now I can get to do this. That's amazing. So they have that slow transition, which can be a lot more forgiving. On the flip side, if you try to replace people, yeah, cool. But if it doesn't work, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, dude, this was an extraordinary value bomb and you went really fast. So I just want to slow down. And for our listeners, I think what Abir just did was you outlined the best practice for AI deployment, not just in finance organizations, but period.
No, thank you.
It's ground up, it's the people on the assembly line, and it's individual tasks, not projects. And it's allowing people, it's aligning incentives, I think might be the most important thing because
Mhm.
there's the human element of needing the person who is the technician to realize the benefit to them, at least in the short term, of deploying this tool. There's an article in Time Magazine citing an MIT study showing that AI is making us dumber. And there's
Yeah.
an impact to it nullifies the value of the professional using it to a degree to where they actually no longer have the capability of thinking through certain processes to the same degree that they did prior to the utilization of the tool. So you saying
Mm.
like, I don't want to use AI for everything, I think is also an interesting and fun kind of philosophical study, which is worth a little, it's like, I remember as a kid, they used to tell us, try to write with your left hand one day a week.
Hmm.
Because it's hard, it makes you better and smarter. Like, you sort of wanna pursue some of the things that are hard, and that is the Luddite example, but that's the best I've got. Talk to me a bit about your biggest failures. What are the things that you're like, "Dude, I fell flat on my face," and how can we, like, allow the listener the opportunity to learn from, whatever it is that you've done and they shouldn't do?
So obviously the biggest one is the one we already spoke about, like just kind of me failing at like the direction that my life was supposed to take with med school that I'd been planning for like 20 years. And then just be like, all right, now what do I do with my life? And then figuring it out. In all honesty,
Why
even
med school?
choosing,
Why is that the 20-year plan? Was that mom and dad, or was that you? You wanted to be a doctor?
there was probably an element of them kind of placing that seed. I mean, just being the type of background immigrant wise that they are, like that's kind of a classic thing.
Yeah, what's
So
your
they probably
heritage? Do you mind
planted
me
it.
asking?
No, of course not. You want to take a guess?
Oh, I'm gonna assume Pakistani.
God damn, how'd you get that? Nobody gets.
Yeah.
Are you Pakistani?
I'm Pakistani, my father's
Yeah,
Pakistani, yeah,
okay.
dude.
All right,
The
fine.
way you
That's how you
spell
got it.
Syed too, I was like, only Pakis do that.
Okay.
But dude,
Only
so in
Pakistani
the
people can
Pakistani
guess.
culture, what is
Yeah.
it? There was a funny joke, I forget what comedian, but it's like, when is a South Asian fetus considered to actually be a soul or alive or whatever,
Yeah.
and the idea being that you're playing on the abortion joke, and it's like when he or she gets their doctorate. So like, unless you're a
Yeah,
doctor,
there you go.
you ain't shit.
Yeah. So there was probably some element of that kind of like planted in my mind, but legitimately I did love it. I was very much down with it. I liked the idea of helping people, taking care of them. I wanted to be a pediatrician or a neurosurgeon because I really like that psychology, neuroscience side of the things.
Mm.
And I also loved everything I learned. Like in when I was doing my physiology degree, like just learning about how muscles work. Like that's something that because I work out a lot. So like that knowledge today is still very useful because I understand like the at a cellular level how muscles work and how creatine works and how ATP works. So a lot of that information was just incredibly interesting to learn. How do our bodies work? Like how do our eyes work and stuff like that? It was very interesting to me. So I loved that, but yeah, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But to answer the point about the other failures, I mean, that was the most dramatic one. Other than that, I wouldn't say there was nothing too that sounds explosive or exciting. It would more than anything just be kind of like the micro failures along the way of like decisions that I should have made better that could have led to a better outcome by today. I think that the worst or biggest one was just that I took too long to get into entrepreneurship. I
Wow,
feel
that's
like
a
I'm
big one.
constantly playing from behind. And it bugs me and it drives me a lot because like also in my world, I work in ecom. So I also get to work with people who are like 20 years old,
22-year-old
making like
billionaires just minting money.
$2 million in sales a month, spending 30K on dinners. Like these are real people that
Yeah.
are clients of ours. And I love them. Like I'm so happy for them. I'm so impressed by what they're able to do. But there's that part of me like, well, shoot, I wish I had been exposed to whatever they'd been exposed to back in the day that I could have hopefully gone down that path. Because had I, who knows what I could have been today. And so part of that is just like me, sometimes being a little bit annoyed. But like I said, it's not something I ruminate too much on because it's not really a question of regrets. It's those were the circumstances at the time. Those were the outcomes that they led to. Now I have the knowledge that I do. So let me just do the best I can. And I just more than anything use that little additional fuel as motivation. Be like, all right, I got to catch up to these kids and just work extra hard.
It's funny, man, because there's no end to the looking up at people out ahead of you. There's always going to be somebody younger, always going to be somebody more successful. Like you've been extraordinarily successful, and there's still kind of that piece of like, man, I wish I'd. When did you start the entrepreneur journey? Do you mind me asking? Give me the timeline.
No, of course. So while I was at VP Finance at that startup I mentioned where we had raised 50 million, and I was kind of running the e-com brand for a while. At a certain point, my dad got sick, so I was living in Austin at the time, and my parents were in Canada. So I basically told the CEO, I'm like, look, I got to go take care of my family, so I need to leave. So told them I had to quit, but I also knew they couldn't like just replace me instantly because I was handling a lot of responsibilities, especially on the ecom. Like I was running the entire thing. So I told them, look, how about this? Give me a 6-month contract. I will bridge the gap for you. You can find a replacement, but I'll just do that remotely. And like at the time, he was very cool guy. We had a good relationship. He's like, yeah, of course. So I actually started applying for jobs at the time. Funnily enough, I actually almost got a job at OpenAI. And this is like way back in the day, like before
No
ChatGPT
way.
was a thing. Yeah, like I still have the email thread of like one of the current finance people that works there. She had interviewed me and I got like to one of the last stages and I didn't make it. But it was like so back in the day that like I think back to how cool it would have been if I were there. Nevertheless, basically I left.
Were there stock options in that job?
I don't know. They had nothing at the time. There was no
Well,
product. It was really just
so
a
the
concept.
nonprofit switched to a profit, right? So like,
Yeah.
I guess maybe they couldn't have even done that.
No, exactly. At the time, I was just like, I like this idea of building AI because I knew that I think Elon Musk at the time I'd read was kind of like one of the funders for it. I'm like, that sounds
Dude,
so
he's
cool.
the
I want to be
reason the damn
involved.
thing exists, and then they
Yeah,
rip the rug
exactly.
out from under him. When you
Yeah,
read that story,
exactly.
it's horrible. It's, like,
Yeah.
super pernicious. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But so basically that was essentially it. I kind of came back to Canada. I was actually applying to jobs at different places. I was like, look, I had never had any entrepreneurial inclinations, nor motivations, nor mentors of that sort my entire life. So it's never even like a thing that lived in my head. It's not like some other people who like, I'll talk to a 20-year-old who's like working at, I don't know, a big four firm. And like, I just want to have my own firm someday. So like, I never had any of that. But I
Mm.
was like, if I'm ever going to try it, now would be the time because I have this contract that takes up 20 hours a week. So this is the best time to give it a shot. Let's see if it works. And I tried a bunch of different like business at the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had like the marketing and the finance skills. I'm like, oh, I could open an accounting firm. Then I pivoted to like a marketing firm for accounting firms that was like lead gen. Then I opened up like some affiliate websites and like blogs that had Amazon links. I was just playing around with like the skills that I developed for SEO, ads, lead gen, all that kind of stuff. But then eventually I made a spreadsheet. I could like create all these different criteria and I added them up. I'm like, okay, finance for e-commerce brands seems to be the place that has the most merit, the most potential, where I can drive the biggest value, lives at the intersection of like my skills. So it's a perfect fit. And I know I can crush it there. So then I tried to focus in some of those things to like a core business. And at the beginning, it was just kind of freelancing essentially. But then it
Mm.
turned into something. So we're like 60-ish people or so now.
You're at 60?
About,
Your head count? Where
yeah,
are they?
everywhere. So Canada, US, Europe, Philippines, Pakistan,
Dude, I didn't
and
realize
then
you were that big a
elsewhere.
shop.
Yeah,
Is that overwhelming? How do you manage 60 people?
it's difficult. I'll be honest. Like the last week or so, my mind has been very much on rolling out our performance evaluations. So I built out the whole structure around it. I did this whole like company-wide training about how to understand them. Even earlier today, I was talking to the managers, like the accounting core managers, about how I'm thinking I should just bring in a people manager to be the person that is responsible for people management at the layer beneath them, because the accountants that
Yeah.
are like more senior, they're not
Deep, dark,
great at
cave
people
dwelling,
management.
over-caffeinated, super
Yeah,
nocturnal, don't wanna talk to
that's the
people.
problem.
Yeah.
So they don't have the people management skills. They don't like it. So I'm like, I could take this off your plate with this new idea I'm conceiving of like having a layer between you, which is not a traditional way of doing anything. But they all loved it. So I was like, okay, cool. So a lot of it just comes down to trying to figure out good systems. And then, of course, as I'm sure you're aware, just bringing in really strong people and having a very strong culture. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that because the truth is, I hated being in an accounting firm and I never would have gone back to working in an accounting firm. And part of the reason that I decided to do one was because I was like, spitefully, I'm like, I can do this better than all of them. Like, I
Yeah.
needed it to be better than what they did so that I could justify the hate that I felt back then. Because if I can't do it better, that means I was wrong. I was just being a bitch. And so, like, I
So
used to
funny.
complain a lot. I'm sorry, I was a very toxic employee, but I used to complain a lot. And to me, I'm like, I need to prove that it's possible to do this well. And so, like, for me, the culture element is extremely important. And so part of it is having a really strong culture, really good systems, hiring really good people and making sure that they're in a position to, be in their zone of genius and stuff. And it is difficult, but I think we're at that level where it's, maybe in the 30-ish range. Everybody's kind of like arm's length from you. So you kind of know all the people, you know how they're doing. You have that feeling where like you can kind of manage it in this very unsophisticated way. And we've gotten to that point where I was like, okay, that's broken. Like now I don't know all the people. So now the systems have to be put in place. And I think that's why a lot of people, they consider like this size or maybe like the 30 to 50 range is kind of like the place where people often plateau because they can't make that transition from intuitive management to system management or whatever. And that's what we're currently working on. So I'm not going to say it's easy, but we're making decent progress, but it is fun.
This dude is such a good point. That really is that's where you jump the shark. 30 to 50 is like it was the worst size to be because you have all the
Yeah.
infrastructure and all the costs of a larger shop without any of the growth or dare I say scale. So all the problems without any of the benefits. I didn't get much bigger. When we sold Solutions 8, I had 80 employees and like another handful of like freelancers and contractors that made up about 100 heads that were more or less full time. And that was always really weird having people that worked for me that I didn't know, I didn't hire, I didn't have and I didn't like the culture actually got away from me. The bigger we get,
Huh.
the more you just don't have full control over it. So what are you doing to influence culture as you grow? What are the and give me tactics, dude. Like what's the specific
Ooh.
thing?
So I have my ideas that are so far seem to have a decent amount of merit, but certainly it's not solved because it's funny. Exactly what you brought up is one of the things. So like I'll travel around and I'll do dinners with like the frontline staff or whatever level they are, but just in different countries. So like I'll go to Pakistan because I have family there, and then I'll invite all of that team to come and like I'll take them out and then they just ask me whatever questions they want. And that was one of the ones that they brought up where, like what's going to happen to our culture as we keep growing because I keep talking about growth, and I'm not saying that I solved it, and I'll give you some of the ideas I have specifically, but I think philosophically, I don't think that it is inevitable that growth will lead to a deterioration in culture or quality. I think it just will deteriorate if the systems are not put in place to be able to kind of maintain it. And so I think a lot of that does come down to things like reinforcement and being able to incorporate the values that you have in everywhere, essentially. So back in the day, again, when I was in my toxic employee era, I thought corporate values were like bullshit. We had values. I'm like, this is stupid. I don't know what this means. And so, like, at the beginning of the company, we didn't have values because I thought it was bullshit. And then one day I had this epiphany where I'm like, oh, wait, it seems like all the people that we hire that we really like seem to have certain traits, and all the people that we don't like that we fire lack certain traits. Maybe those are our values. And so when I realized that, like, I spent a lot of time kind of refining them, building them out, trying to document them, and then try to incorporate that into every piece of what we do. So it's very robustly implemented into our hiring pipeline to make sure that we're trying to identify those values along the way. It's obviously built into our performance evals. It's built into the way that we communicate a lot of things and the way that we talk about what needs to be done. I haven't accomplished getting to 200 people and seeing that like it worked. So I don't know that this is necessarily the answer, but it is what we're doing. It does seem to be working well enough. And I think that just having that vigilance constantly to make sure that the people that are coming into the company are upholding the values and not having tolerance for people who don't is really how it ends up being maintained. Because to a certain extent, every manager and their reports will have their own microculture inevitably. And so you just want to make sure that that microculture is the fewest standard deviations away from like the core that you intend as possible. So as much as you can reinforce it through good selection of from a hiring perspective and good reinforcement with the person and just good messaging at a corporate level, then that's about the best you can do, I would imagine.
So a couple massive value bombs that I love, love, love. One, you just gave us a framework for the identification of your values. You take everything that the employees have that you like, minus everything that people have that you don't like, and that equals value. And I'm with you, by the way. But I think every entrepreneur was probably a toxic employee at one time. I know I was. The reason we think values are bullshit is because people say them and then they don't live them. I remember being in organizations where I was at a call center. I sold long distance for MCI as a kid. That's how old I am. And, the values were like truth and ethics and goodness and fairness. And then it's like, go out there and screw that little old lady for, you know what I mean? It's like whatever it takes. So when you just pay lip service to values, there's the lack of continuity there, I think, is what makes us call it bullshit. And people, they thirst for it. If there's integrity behind the values. So I love the framework that you just offered. That was value bomb number one. Value bomb number two that I never really thought about, dude. And this is so good. Every supervisor has their own microculture. That's such an interesting concept to really think about. So when you're thinking about who you promote or who you hire, it's not just about proficiency. It's about what's the microculture they're going to bring, because microculture plus microculture plus microculture equals culture, right?
Yeah.
And it ends up being kind of the middle manager types that really drive that. And I think that's why my culture got away from me, because we were very meritocratic, and the people that I promoted, it was like, oh, you're the best. And it did get a little spicy because it became very easy to leave people behind. So I like that a lot. What am I asking what am I not asking you that I should be asking you? What would a smarter person ask you?
Great question. Why I joined Driven?
Yeah, well, I'm not here to pimp out my mastermind, but I do like that you're in it. Why did you join Driven?
So, I mean, because of you, mostly. But I'll give you the slightly longer answer. So I started following you a long time ago when you showed up on Perpetual Traffic as a guest talking about smart shopping. That was the first time I heard you. I was like, this guy is knowledgeable, and I run traffic. So like, it was helpful for me to learn because I implemented on my clients. And then of course you became the co-host, and then you became famous and all that stuff. And you kind of moved along. I just kept like monitoring from like the distance of the shadows. And then I remember you started off Driven. I was like, oh, that sounds super cool. I'd love to learn from him. But partially it was a little bit of a money thing because like we're still growing. So to me, I had not, let's say, gotten accustomed to spending money on education outside of like university. But like the idea of paying to learn from people was not something that I'd been used to doing. So it always felt like a bit of a strange, like almost uncomfortable concept.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I realized two things a bit more recently. The first one was that you had a podcast that a friend of mine shared with me, where you talked to someone about the way that you set up your hiring structure and like all the fly traps you had. And I remember listening to that. I'm like, holy shit, this is brilliant. Like there's so many good things. And I manually took it, I sent it to my HR team. Then I sat down with them, rebuilt our entire hiring pipeline, massive improvements. Our hiring pipeline improved so much just by me listening to the stuff you said and then just thinking about how I can make our system better based on what you inspired. And then I had a moment, I'm like, well, shit, if I had been in that mastermind, I might have known this stuff 2 years ago. So all of the progress I didn't make was because I wasn't exposed to this earlier. And if I'm just exposed to these things, even if it does cost money or whatever, then great, I'll just make progress faster. And it was like one of the more point, like on an intellectual level, I understood the concept that, like, and Alex Hormozy will talk about it. It's like, yeah, you got to pay for education. I'm like, yeah, of course. But like emotionally, I hadn't really like accepted, just it hadn't resonated at that level. But the second thing is, then I was like, then why did I have so much trouble doing it for so long? And what I realized is that if I had to pick a strength that I had, it would be that I'm good at solving problems. Like, I'm good at figuring anything out, frankly. Like, I mean, that's why I was able to do science and the med school type stuff, and then accounting, and then marketing and entrepreneurial. Like, anything I've come across, I can figure it out. And I think it's obviously a big strength, but the underlying, or the second edge to that sword, if you will, was that there was a point of pride that was very subtle that came with it, where it said, like, if I have to ask for help, then I failed because I couldn't figure it out myself. And so to an extent, it's not that I didn't want to ask for help. And by no means was that I was admitting like nobody knows more than me. Of course, there are people that know more than me, but I should be able to figure it out. And so that caused a hesitation for me to go out and find places and people that I could learn from, because I'm like, I should. And I failed if I didn't. And so to a certain extent, it was just those two realizations at the same time. I was like, yeah, no, this is stupid. I just need to get in there and learn from him.
Dude, I appreciate so. Thank you for helping me pitch Driven. If you're listening, go check out drivenmastermind.com. We're definitely not for everybody. Man, dude, this was amazing. Abir, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. You really are one of the world's greatest minds. I learned so much from you. I hope we get to do this again.
Of course.
If you're listening, this is World's Greatest Minds with Abir Syed, who proves that the future of e-commerce is not just building, it's balancing. With a sharp financial mind, a marketer's intuition, and a CPA's discipline, Abir helps founders scale smarter, stay lean, and never lose sight of their edge. If you found value here, share this episode with somebody making big decisions on thin margins. Explore his work at UpCounting.com and unlock clarity in your numbers. Abir, thank you for showing that finance isn't just about the past, it's how we build tomorrow. Until next time, stay grounded in vision and anchored in insight. This is World's Greatest Minds. I'm your host, Kasim. Peace. You've just heard another powerful episode on World's Greatest Minds. For links, resources, and full show notes from this episode, go to worldsgreatestminds.com, where you can also subscribe so you never miss another episode. Drop us a review because your feedback fuels the mission, and share this with somebody who's willing to buck the status quo. Most importantly, tell us who you think we should interview next. Nominate the people who you believe have the results, the track record, and the brilliance to truly qualify as one of the world's greatest minds. Join us weekly as we forge innovation in real time. This is World's Greatest Mind. The revolution of thought continues with you.